Good morning. Thank you for being on time. I appreciate that very much. I'm going to start today with two small confessions, which I hope is okay in today's world of tell-all in public reality shows. My first confession is that, as you can see, I don't speak French. It's a pending task. It's one that when I was invited to speak here, I said, yes, this is my opportunity. I will learn French. And life got in the way. And I'm afraid with my age, and as I get older and older, I'm thinking it's just not going to happen. I love the language. I understand when it's spoken slowly and when small children speak it. In the conference, you speak quite fast, I have to say. So I decided to do the slides in French, at least because I can read and do some writing, and I have to thank my colleague, Dr. Guichon, for being so patient and going over and revising my many mistakes. The mistakes that are here are mine, okay? My second confession is that when I wrote the abstract for this talk, I was in an existential crisis. As a researcher in telecollaboration, and that's going to influence the way I talk, or what I talk about, not the way I talk, but what I talk about, and maybe the way I talk as well. And I'm hoping that this will open up a floor for debate, rather than leading you down my own path of confusion. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that it will just open up some areas that perhaps need to be discussed in more detail. I'm also going to use notes because my slides are in French, I get lost, okay? So I'm in a bloody fine mess, all right? These are words that were spoken to me by a doctoral student of mine as she was trying to deal with the beaucoup de données that she had from a year-long exchange. As we all know, and I've discussed this just yesterday and today with some people here, we're in a privileged position as people, as researchers in telecollaboration or online exchanges, because the data is there and it's easy to get. And that sometimes can actually be a detriment to us because we have so much data at times that we just don't know how to even approach it. She was also in a bloody fine mess because she was trying to deal with what approach am I going to take to dealing with this data. And that was also the sentiment that I picked up from some master students, an MA class that I taught on research and telecollaboration just last semester. And so I thought, well, you know, I'll just do an overview of what's been done. And then I ended up saying the same words, I'm in a bloody fine mess, because there's so much that has been done. And I'll come back to that in a minute. In 2006, Richard Kern asked a very valid question. There's an echo now, is that okay? Yeah, okay. The question about what is CALL? What does CALL stand for? It's an important question because we're in an evolution of CALL, computer-assisted language learning. In 2006, Richard Kern asked, what is it? What does it stand for? What does it encompass? And I think that's really important because since then, all new terms, they haven't replaced CALL, but new terms have come up. Computer-supported collaborative learning, computer-mediated communication and language learning, telecollaborative language learning, mobile-assisted language learning. It's evident that because of the amount of research that's going on, because of the amount of technology that's coming out there, that it's expanding, but for researchers, it makes it really, really difficult for us to position ourselves. I'm hoping, I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to pose some questions, and I hope that in the end, we're not just going to say, okay, we're in a bloody fine mess, let's just stay there. Psychologists always tell us that in order to find out where we are and how to position ourselves, you can take a multiple choice test and figure out your identities. So I'm not a psychologist, but I devised a multiple choice test for us in computer-mediated communication or telecollaborative exchanges. Researchers working, sorry, I jumped to one. Researchers working in the domain of computer-supported online exchange and language teaching learning are in love with acronyms. 2, pressured to be innovative, including coining new phrases. Unsure of where we stand as researchers. All of the above. Okay, tongue-in-cheek, slight humor, but I do believe that there are some truths underlying this test. So I think it puts us at a very propitious moment for reflection. We can examine where we've come in order to make decisions about where we want to go. There's been several very, very excellent reviews on research in this area. I've listed a few up here. This, to me, the fact that there have been that many reviews on this research says a lot about the field we're in. I personally don't know of any other field, or perhaps Clil or Emile in French, but I don't know of very many other fields that in a course of about 10 years have had this many reviews on the type of research that's going on. This says a lot about the field that we're in, about how much it's growing, and I think the importance of this field. Another important issue that Kern brought up in 2006 is the importance of finding a research approach that is appropriate to the data that is coming out of online exchanges. I just mentioned that in passing earlier. We have an advantage in the fact that doing field work is a lot easier now. Some of you may recall packing up your cameras and your recorders and going off to classes to collect research. The collection is there. It's online. It's recorded. It's much easier to get now. But we also have to be careful about the approach that we're going to take to that data. In a review, I started doing the review, well, as I said, I started doing a review, looking at types of approaches that have been taken with computer-mediated communication. There are approaches coming from communication studies, obviously, psychology, cognitive studies, gender studies, literacy studies, even computational science. Is that good? Is it bad? I don't know. I'm not passing judgment. But I do ask myself if perhaps we're moving away from what we are originally, what Kern said, that we were grounded in second language acquisition. Again, I'm not passing judgment. I'm throwing out the question here. There are also some very exciting new approaches being taken to working with online data, cultural historical activity theory, connectivism, you've got chaos theory, you've got complexity theory, network knowledge, loads of exciting new approaches, new paradigms that in some cases have been applied in traditional second language acquisition research, but in many cases have not. But they're being applied to online exchanges. And if you're thinking to yourselves, duh, Sherlock Holmes. Yes, I have a 15-year-old son. I'm used to these comments now. It is very logical, yes. It's logical because what we are working with, the very area that we were working in is crossing boundaries. Second language acquisition, traditional second language acquisition research has always been done, usually, in most cases, has been done in a classroom, that does not go beyond that classroom, even though that many of them say they do. But in our cases, we are crossing boundaries. So it's inevitable, I think, that we begin to look outside of more traditional research paradigms, because we're looking for new frontiers. But for young researchers coming up behind us, it can be a bloody mess, right? So perhaps in order to think about where we're going, it behooves us first to look at what we've done so far. In Kern's review, he had identified some areas of study that are still going strong in research today. One of those focuses is on tools, and in my review, I did notice that there's a move away from the tool towards, well, I've used this tool as an integrated approach to get some sort of impact. So a move away from the tool towards tool as part of a process. I am seeing that somewhat in the research, more focus on specific interactions and how the tool facilitates those interactions. I'm thinking of Dr. Zuru's talk yesterday. It wasn't so much about the tool as how that tool facilitated different types of learning, language learning in that case. Of course, research on tools is very appropriate, it's very necessary, especially if we want beginner teachers who have not explored these areas to join us. And it's assumed that if we're here, it's because we believe in this and we do want to propagate this type of approach to language learning. So obviously, focus on tools is very much needed. But we need to bear in mind that because tools, in earlier research, you could pretty much divide it into blog, wiki, email, or chat. Now you've got multiple tools platforms that have multiple tools that are layered in, so it's very difficult to pinpoint one tool. Now the focus needs to be more on this multi-layered approach to how tools are being used in an integrated fashion. It may not be this one, how it fits into the task, which we'll look at later on. Interestingly enough, there was one tool that frequently appeared in one particular strand, and that was wikis and collaborative learning. And obviously, again, that seems like a Sherlock Holmes sort of comment, because wikis are all about collaborative learning. But as a teacher, one question that came to my mind as I saw that was, how many of my students, once they get out in the professional workforce, are actually going to be doing collaborative writing on a wiki? I'm not so sure that they will be participating in doing something like that. So I think we also need to look at the tools we're using, how that tool is transferable. The competence they're learning in one is transferable to other tools as well. Food for thought. Another area that is going on very strong in online language learning is corpora. And I confess here, I said, confession time, public confession time here. I admit that I have practically negligent knowledge on corpora. I'm definitely not an expert in corpora. I'll leave that to the experts to discuss. I find it a fascinating field, and I think that it has absolute extraordinary potential for promoting language learning, especially data-driven corpora use. But like I said, I'm going to leave this one to the experts. Just to clarify, by the way, I'm listing some work that's been done. This is a mere sample in these areas, obviously, because space limitations, and also because I'm sure you have your limitations of patience about listening to me. So I'm not going to list everything I've found. I'm just putting these up here as exemplar work that do represent these fields. Another area, and this is obvious, is language output. This is the widest and most voluminous domain that I've found in research in computer-mediated communication. It was identified by Kern in 2006, and it's still going on very strongly. And it makes sense because, after all, this is what we're after as language teachers, communication. So computer-mediated communication is going to be the crux of what we're doing. It is a wide umbrella term that could be broken down into a lot of different areas. You've got studies looking at discrete language features. You've got, we've seen yesterday several talks on feedback, error correction, teacher-led, student-initiated feedback, peer feedback. There's been quite a bit of work in all of these areas. Other aspects of communication or of language output is also oral fluency. Again, it's almost a Sherlock Holmes type comment, but the oral fluency is obviously a target of what we're doing, and there's been significant amount of research in that area. It also coincides, I think I'm seeing more and more research on this because of the increment in the possibilities in the classroom of video conferencing, of Skypes, more and more classrooms that now have these facilities to do that. The impact, even though this is an obvious field, noticing some interesting research. Notice the impact of text-based chat on oral production. So you hear what I just referred to of the wiki. How is that transferable? The competencies used from one tool or one modality is transferred into another. This is a very interesting aspect to look at. Because obviously the tools we're using now are not going to be the tools that future generations will be using. So it's not so much getting them trained in one particular tool as getting them trained or getting them to learn competences that will then be transferred. So I think that's a very exciting area. I'm hoping that this is the right translation of digital literacies. We had some back and forth between myself and Nicolas about how you translate digital literacies. This is a very exciting area too. Big impulse from the New London group on literacies, in plural, in the 1980s. The wonderful work they did on the idea that you have different type of literacies according to context, bringing the context into the picture. Also work done by especially Gunther Kress in semiotics. All of this has had an important impact on computer-mediated communication research. We're talking multiple is the key word here, multiple literacies, multiple modalities. We're all aware of, I'm thinking of the research that Dr. Guichon is doing, of you can have 2 or 3 screens on one screen, plus a filming of the student in the classroom. I mean, how many modalities? And they're at the same time they're typing IM while they're speaking. So you have so many different multiple perspectives, which is such an exciting area to do research on, but also the biggest headache a researcher can find. Because trying to capture, describe, analyze, and explain all of these multiple participants, multiple modalities, multiple voice, multiple scenarios, on screen, off screen, and so forth is a bit like trying to explain what goes on at a teenage party when the lights go out. Yes? And as you can see, I'm a teen mom and traumatized by the experience. And so all my metaphors are coming from there. And I apologize for that, but extremely difficult. And I've had so many researchers come and say to me, well, what do I do with it? Well, this is what we're here to talk about. One other area that's extremely important is the intercultural competences. Again, it's been a salient area of research. It's been approached from many different ways. It's obviously the vast opportunities for foreign language teachers to bring in, through communication, online communication, to bring in the language and culture, it's phenomenal. But I'm seeing research that's moving away from one language, one target culture, towards the idea of pluricultural or global interculturality, which I very welcome. I think it's wonderful. This is probably due to the ubiquity of online communication, and often with participants from so many different cultures. So you can no longer think of cultures as being homogeneous. The idea of nation state is disappearing, thank goodness. And now there's more focus on plurilingual, pluricultural. And wonderful things now going on with studies in lingua franca. And I think this is important. As researchers, we need to be aware that our participants, when they come into these exchanges, are hardly ever monolingual. They are plurilingual. They're coming in as participants with many languages, and whatever they're doing in the online is a +1 of multiple. And that is important to take into account, but adds yet more to the complexity of what we're studying. So, apart from the domains or the areas that Kern indicated, there's some other areas that are still going on very strong, or have been fairly traditional in computer-mediated communication. You have attitudes, representations, points of view from both teacher and students. Autonomy, does this promote autonomous learning? Development of specific skills. You still find research divided into listening, speaking, so not so much integrated, but a focus on one particular skill. And of course, just the online exchange, pragmatic aspects. How are emoticons being used to promote communication, for example? There's also some areas that I'm finding that are, I feel, emerging from the very type of situations we're in. As Ligne and Donahoe, is that pronounced correctly, Donahoe? Yeah. I'm used to Donahue rather than Donahoe. Social cultural theories have had a strong impact on teaching and learning, and that has then influenced on the way research is being carried out. That's also a very welcome addition. It's bringing the focus on interaction, and I'm thinking of Christine Develot's work, which is very much focused on interaction, and as well Dr. Guichon's. This new focus, this recognition that research has to be contextualized. And this is a wonderful area for researchers to go forward, and I'm hoping that they won't run into bureaucratic barriers like comments or doctoral advisors who say, yeah, that's an innovative idea, but it hasn't been tried yet, so we can't do it, which is too often another problem with research like this. Where are we going? There's been some strong focus on the social interaction. As I said, social cultural influence. So you've got lots of work being done on collaborative learning, excellent work. Beginning to work on communities of practice. Even some people taken from Bonnie Norton's idea of imagined communities of learning. It's very exciting things going on. But as someone who's done some work in communities of practice, I think that there's a caveat, a word of caution here. We need to be careful about what we name as communities of practice. Sometimes we see communities of practice where it's hard to validate whether it's community of practice, because it's a group that we put together. We put our group with another group, and we say it's a community of practice. Is it really a community of practice, or is it just two groups of people forced to be together? I think we need to say communities of practice are defined by the interaction of the interactants, their practices, their vocalization. So just for researchers going in that area, please do be careful, because it's very difficult to validate from the inside was a community of practice. Another flourishing area of research takes its impetus from the pedagogical perspective, and this is so, so very important, because if we really want we want this to take off, and it's supposed that we do, then teachers need to know how to do it. It's not something that comes naturally. So there's been a focus on tasks. Wonderful work out there. This is so important. What constitutes a task in computer-mediated communication? Departing from, I think, very good work in task-based language learning, most of the work, and some project-based language learning. This is a growing area, a very important area, and also a focus on teacher education. And this is, I hope, to see a lot more studies in this area. I have to hurry. New identities. Obviously, identities and social presence. Both of these are very important. What are the roles of the learners as they come on? How do they learn social presence? Because social presence has been studied and research shows it's such an important part of language learning. So how are these roles negotiated, renegotiated, accepted by the others? These are all very relevant areas, and I'm hoping some of the young researchers here will be inspired by some of these. Also, some new areas emerging. Gaming. There's been some interest in gaming, the use of virtual worlds. It's a reduced area, and it's understandable, because I can see teachers thinking, well, I'm going to have a hard time explaining to the parents why I have the students in War of Warcraft. Yeah, understandable that it's not something that's real wide, that it's a subgroup of a subgroup. But some very exciting things going on in both virtual worlds and massively multiple online gaming, MOGs, if you like. Also, work with young language learners. It's been traditionally considered that young language learners or adult beginners do not have the competencies to take part in online communicative events. Research is showing otherwise. There's been some astounding results coming out of that, so this is an area to keep your eye out for. So, right, so we've been there, we've done this. There's a growing body of research on computer-mediated communication, and as Dr. Zuru has said, their tools are now seen as peripheral aids to a reorganization of cognitive processes that takes place through interaction, which harks back to what I just mentioned about Ligne and Donahoe, the social-cultural. It's more focused on the interaction, more focused on what's happening, how it's happening, So, back to this question of where are we? Yes? Is this merely an academic question? Do we need to decide if we are a consolidated area of research, or are we a subgroup of a subgroup of a subgroup? Linguistics, applied linguistics, second language acquisition, technologically enhanced language learning, whatever. Are we a subgroup or a subgroup? I feel that we are a growing collective. And I feel that this has advantages. I also feel like it has responsibilities. If we become a consolidated area, if we say, okay, yes, we're a group, then we can make some decisions. We can help ensure that there are studies in computer-mediated communication in master's courses. We can help PhD students not have to search outside their own countries to find an advisor. As one situation, I was just talking to a young researcher earlier. She couldn't even get her research question to be validated in her university, in her country. She had to go outside. It can also help us to create affiliations and bridges between researchers who work in similar fields, and maybe we don't even know about it. In other words, convergence of researchers. And how do we do this? Exactly the same way that we are asking our learners to learn, through online collaboration. You can read this, but we also need to be aware that the complexity of the situation we are in, transnational, interdisciplinary, plurilingual, multimodal, multi-party, online exchanges creates a complexity that I've just listed. And it brings us many times to say, okay, we're in a bloody mess. So we need to be careful as well about what approach we're going to take. What do I mean by this? Let's just take a situation. I'm setting up an online language learning exchange, and then I'm going to do research on it, and my theoretical approach is sociocultural, taken from cognitive psychology. Pedagogical approach is problem-based learning, taken from engineering. Then my research perspective might be connectivism, which is taken from neuroscience. Yes? We're doing this, we're transpassing borders, but we have to show that it's a solid way to go. Dr. Guichon has pointed out that the very complexity of our situations and venues that we are exploring means that we have to borrow from other disciplines. But in here, I'm not trying to ruffle feathers, but I do feel like we have to be careful. Complexity doesn't give us permission for sloppy research. If we're a collective and we want to maintain as a collective a good name, then we have to be vigilant about that. The very nature of data that were compiled from complex situations, 2 minutes? Often lead us to take mixed modalities, mixed methods. But we have to be careful using mixed methods, because mixed methods is not easy to use. We often wonder, mixed methods, quantitative and qualitative, even deciding what they are is difficult, because quantitative can be numerical, but it can also be textual. We can have textual data that we quantify. So where are the lines? We also, if you're doing mixed methods, you need to have a good working knowledge of all the methods you're using, which is not always the case. And we also need to be aware of our own discipline prejudice. And I'll give you an example. I don't know if he's here. A young man wrote a review, yes. A very acute criticism of a book I co-edited. And I wrote the introduction. As you can see, the criticism is about the introduction. And as the reviewer points out, we had our own bias. And so I just want to show you that here I am. I'm not trying to accuse you. My mother always said, if you point a finger, be careful. You've got 3 pointing back at you. All right? Wisest woman I know. So just wanted to show you. I know there's 3 fingers pointing back at me. Nicolas also argued for stabilizing the body of knowledge and adopting rigorous methodologies. And I said, I completely agree with him. And he said that we need to get our research back into the educational community. I just come in on the tram. I was talking about the fact that sometimes our work is not always transparent. So we also need to be aware that we've got to, the research we're doing, get it back out to the teachers. I completely agree with Guichon on that. And as I said, bearing in mind the complexity of our situation, it's not always easy to be transparent. Okay, I'm finishing up. Apart from all these questions I've posed, there are other issues, and I'm going to run over time because I want to talk about these issues. They're really, really important. If we become a collective, there are things we need to be aware of. Only too recently, I've run into more than once issues of ethics of international data. We're straddling so many borders, and so what we see as being a virtual exchange, in the end, on legal terms, is very physical. If you've collected data and you have a researcher in one country, what that researcher can do in that country may not be the same thing that the other researcher, your partner in another country, can do with that data. Questions like, if you're working between 2 countries, who has rights to that data and what can they do with it? Do both researchers have to pass an international examiner board of research review in both countries? These are questions I don't think we've really thought about, but as a collective, perhaps we need to, and maybe as a collective, we can even start writing some international guidelines. Not just focusing on how to do research and how to do the teaching, but focusing on these very important legal issues. Like I said, I've run into it on a personal level already 3 times in the last year. Very unpleasant. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We're exploring, we're in unexplored territory, and we've got to navigate this course together. So that's my moment, that's my argument for a strong collective. I think there's a lot of young researchers out there. I haven't tried to make you discouraged, I hope that you become discouraged. Very encouraged to do this. There's other areas that Karen has pointed out that we need to do research in that I feel like are still there and not being done yet. Our competence they're learned online being transferred to face-to-face situations. More political and educational implications, our curricula adapting to new literacies. Does social capital of digital knowledge create inequalities in society? And there's so many other questions. The question here for me, the basic question is, we are talking about a new type of knowledge. Crowdsourcing. You have an example here. 10 days, gamers needed 10 days to solve a problem about DNA that researchers individually had spent 10 years and had not solved. So the teacher, what kind of content can the teacher bring into the classroom anymore? Because knowledge is no longer in the hands of one, it's in the hands of many. This whole concept of how we're constructing knowledge and how our students need to know how to construct knowledge is key to the type of research we should be doing. So, as I said at the beginning of my talk, I've probably posed as many questions as I did answers. And I really feel like the teacher here in the comic you can see, all of you have got smartphones and iPads, and you've probably all clicked around and found many contradictions and resources that are saying exactly what I've said, saying exactly the opposite. But that's today's world. And that's what being knowledgeable is. These are the competences we need to teach and to do research on how to teach them better. I would very much like to thank these people in particular. Thank you for your patience. It's been a pleasure. Here's the list of the bibliography that I cited that was not in the list of works being made reference to. So, thank you. I don't know if there's time for questions.
Comme vous avez dépassé un peu le temps, il reste juste 5 minutes pour les questions.
Sorry.
Alors, Katarina.
Je peux poser la question en français or in English. Est-ce que je peux poser la question en anglais? Melinda, very nice meeting you and also hearing your presentation. The question is the following. In your 5 categories of areas on CMC, why didn't you include telecollaboration or online exchange as part of the CMC, or do you see it as an overarching area?
I do. This is what I said earlier about where are these acronyms, what do we fall in? I was thinking computer-mediated communication included telecollaboration. I was thinking of that, although I recognize that many people separate the two. Yeah. Or the opposite. Yeah, it's such, I think it's very difficult, and sometimes I feel like I'm just splitting hairs. I mean, telecollaboration for me, the word collaboration is key. Collaboration at a distance. And I don't feel like all computer-mediated communication includes collaboration. Depends on how the exchange is set up. But you're absolutely right. Perhaps I should have included telecollaboration as an area. And then there's been extensive work in that area specifically, yes.
And a very short question about the IPR, intellectual property rights. there has been many years that researchers are doing research on online exchange, more than 15 years perhaps, and the issue of property, intellectual property of data has never been raised in telecollaboration, which is kind of curious. We take for granted that data of our students belong to us, which is of course not true. We just anonymize, but we really need a serious look. And also we face this more and more now with open environments like social networking sites and communities. What's your approach?
I think, if you're asking me if I have the solution, I do not, okay? I think that as a collective, we need to think about this and perhaps try to come up with some guidelines from our own experience. I think also that it's beginning to come up because before, I felt like research was a little bit more isolated. Journals are going online, which has a lot of impact, whether you like, maybe we haven't really studied that, but the more the journals go online, the more access people have across the world to read the research that someone else is doing, and then they say, oh, but that's my data, right? Because you could easily publish in your own country something in a language, and it never got outside of that country, and now it is. So I think that might be one of the reasons why we're beginning to see these problems. Plus, more and more people are becoming interested, so they're reading more about it, and it's no longer just in languages. Other fields of education are also taking off in what is telecollaboration, so perhaps that's the reason it's becoming more prominent as a problem. The problem was always there. We're just now beginning to see it, I think. Yeah. I left you with more questions than answers, right?